All swords in Destiny 2 currently hold their place in the sandbox for a very specific reason. Whether that's the DPS monster that is the Exotic Lament, the consistent heavy hitting spin to win falling guillotine, or even the ranged hack and slash from Solar Scar projectile attack. But there's one sword out there that is quite simply a breakout one even within its own archetype. Bequest is the legendary arc sword that on paper doesn't massively stand out. You can get it from the Deep Stone Crypt Raid on Europa, and it's likely you haven't really seen it used by anyone. However, it quite literally has a secret hiding in plain sight that you might have missed. All legendary swords that any character can equip, and no matter what the archetype they sit in, have exactly the same impact stat, whether that's vortex frame swords, caster frame swords, or adaptive frame swords. These can be changed slightly depending on the blade perk you pick, granting a slight change in the base impact and ammo capacity. This is where the Bequest differs though, as it has by default an additional 10 stats in impact. All other legendary swords in Destiny 2 have a base impact of 60, whereas Bequest sits at a massive 70. This is quite simply a huge difference, as it means the damage output is massively improved even without any perks to buff damage or builds, and technically makes it the only adaptive frame sword you should be using for general day-to-day play. This acts as roughly a 13% difference in damage between my masterwork Negative Space and Bequest, with Negative Space hitting for 15396 on this Lost Sector boss and Bequest hitting the same target for 17509. This is basically a free frenzy style buff for just using a different sword in the same archetype. It also beats out the Hunter's Quickfang hitting at 16302, with the Falling Guillotine at 15698 and the Solar Scar Adept hitting at 16483 even with an Adept Impact mod equipped, rounding out the legendary sword options. Now obviously there's a ton of roll options and things you can do with all these swords to max out their damage output. But before we take a look at the roll options for Bequest, as well as covering off a build you can use in game, why not hit the subscribe button if you're new here. I covered tons of builds and games aimed at making the endgame of Destiny 2 accessible for everyone, so that you too can get that loot. Liking this video really does help me out and is always appreciated. You can also now become a channel member for access to exclusive emotes and a member's badge. And why not join our community Discord server as well, the links are down in the description. As we said earlier, Bequest is an adaptive frame sword, which means you can launch a heavy uppercut attack which is significantly stronger with full sword energy. I've got Honed Edge, which gives a flat bump to its base impact, and Enduring Guard to boost its guarding efficiency and resistance. The two main perks on my roll have really good synergy, with Relentless Strikes granting sword ammo on 3 consecutive sword hits within a short time, as well as Assassin's Blade which boosts movement speed and damage on sword kills. This is a 15% buff lasting for 5 seconds and can be indefinitely topped up on subsequent kills. I've also got an Impact Masterwork and I've got the Boss Spec mod equipped. The only other perks I would look at for on this sword though would be Fresh in the first perk column to grant bonus super energy on final blows, and Surrounded in the final perk column for a nice boost to damage when near 3 or more enemies. If you do want to grab this sword and farm a few rolls, I'd highly recommend farming the Templar in the normal Vault of Glass to maximise your Spoils of Conquest before then tackling Taniks in the Deep Stone Crypt and looting the cash at the end of that raid for further rolls. Now if you want to use this sword to stand out above the crowd, then we've got an amazing sword build just for you that has incredible DPS and ad clearing potential. It's also a build which doesn't use any of the seasonal artifact mods, so it should stand the test of time as well. We'll be sticking with the Hunter for this one, and in particular the Stasis Revenant, so we can use the Mask of Bakris Exotic Helmet. I'll state again that Bakris is massively slept on in PvE content, because not only does its Light Shift perk change your dodge into a longer range faster moving shift that cloaks you during use, but it also grants some sweet damage boost too. It grants the Light Shift perk after using your class ability, which boosts all arc weapon damage by 10% and an additional 10% to all slowed and frozen combatants too. This lasts for 10 seconds, during which time your class ability won't recharge either. The Light Shift will work on top of the Assassin's Blade damage buff, as well as the Charge with Light Lucent Blade. Lucent Blade will buff sword damage for 5 seconds by a further 35%, granting the Need perk after causing damage with a sword. Chuck on elemental ordnance to create elemental wells on grenade final blows, along with elemental charge to become charged with light when collecting a well. Font of Wisdom will also boost your super cooldown too when collecting an elemental well. We're using elemental ordnance as it's really consistent when using the Shatter Dive aspect along with the Glacial Grenade to destroy groups of enemies and instantly become charged with light. Grim Harvest will create Stasis shards too on defeating slowed or frozen targets. This will grant melee energy, but if you put on the Whisper of Rhyme fragment, it'll grant you an overshield too. Whisper of Chains will also give you damage resistance on incoming damage when nearby to frozen stasis crystals or frozen targets. And lastly, Whisper of Shards will aid with boosting your grenade recharge on shattering stasis crystals when using your Shatter Dive ability, ultimately allowing you to keep up with your charge with light setup. Withering Blade will be the main ability you use to slow and freeze targets to benefit from the light shift buff provided by the Mask of Bacchus, and don't forget to use the Gambler's Dodge so that when you dodge near enemies it'll grant you an instant melee charge as well. Use double bomber mods on your class item if you can, as it'll further reduce your grenade cooldown when using your class ability. If you really want, you can also pair it with Cloud Strike to deal high precision and range damage when a sword isn't the optimal choice, or even just as a DPS wombo combo. Remember that Sword Ammo Finder and Scavenger mod will help keep this sword build topped up for you when you need it. You'll also need a high mobility stat so that you can use the Bacchus dodge as often as possible. Powerful Friends is a top tier mod for this if you're struggling, as well as any mobility mods. All in all, it's a fluid setup, allowing you to be constantly charged with light using near unlimited grenades to destroy waves of adds using Shatter Dive, and then use your Bacchus dodge and freeze to take out bosses with the powered up Bequest sword. If you're going to rock this sword on a Warlock, I'd highly recommend an arc setup using the Mantle of Battle Harmony, where a fresh roll would be really strong. Titans, you can also use the Stronghold Exotic Gauntlets, which are great for any sword centric playstyle. Ultimately, and if I'm being honest with myself, is this sword going to take a place in your loadout? Probably not, but what it does offer is an extremely strong alternative, especially when there's a lack of good arc swords available, given that the lackluster Temptations hook is the only other legendary option. I hope you enjoyed this dive into a unique sword, and maybe that it opened your eyes as to what it can do. If you did, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also join our community Discord server too. Head over and show your best drip for your Guardians from this past season. That's it for this one though, so on that, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.